This presentation is about the effects of rate limiting on Wi-Fi. Hey. My name is Troy Martin. I'm Troy Mart on Twitter. I have a hashtag down at the bottom that's Wi-Fi with purpose. So I just wanted to explain that a little bit. I spend a fair bit of time on airplanes, like I'm sure a lot of you do as well. But there's a commercial that plays every time the plane takes off, and it's about an investing company. And the investment company always ends with the tagline, invest with purpose, right? It's about intelligently investing. And also in Canada, we have a traditional Canadian dish. It's called poutine, and it's in its most simplest form. It's French fries with gravy and cheese curds. It's absolutely delicious. If you come to Canada, have poutine. But on Twitter, there's a poutine with purpose Twitter handle. And so I kind of morphed that into the Wi-Fi with purpose Twitter hashtag. And to me, that represents when you're putting together your Wi-Fi network, whether you're designing it, you're testing it, or you're validating it, do it with purpose, right? Have an intent of what you're trying to do instead of willy-nilly placing, just APs on a map. So Wi-Fi with purpose is kind of the hashtag. All right. So sometimes when you create rate limits or you throw up CAFTA portal pages or you create some sort of barrier for your users to get access to the network resources, users will find an easier way to get around it. Okay, so in this, we look at an electronic circuit. You put up a small bit of resistance. Users are going to try find a way around that. Right, if you're putting a rate limit on them, they can't leverage the applications they want to use. Either they'll try to connect to a different SSID, disable Wi-Fi, flip to cellular if they have unlimited plans, but they'll try to find a way to get around that. So even if you have the best intentions, you put together a well-intended design, you want to enforce a security policy where you're authenticating your users connecting to your network, you have some sort of barrier or obstacle that you want them to go through. If it's too much of a hassle or too much of a burden for users, they'll find a way around that, right? So if you throttle them back too much, users will find another way to get to their resources, okay? And last night, over supper, we had a lot of interesting discussions. We were drawing images and pictures on white paper, and one of the people at the table started quoting movies. And so I thought, what's an interesting way that you can upset the most number of people with one phrase? All right, so some people will be able to laugh at this, but I'm sure some people in this room, this is really going to bother them. Right? They're going to be irritated for the rest of this presentation because of this. Okay. We also talked about supper, how I'm sure many of you guys in this room have experienced this. Whereas you're walking through malls, airports, hotels, you're staring at the ceiling. Right? As Wi-Fi professionals, we're looking for access points in the ceilings, and we're trained to look up. But I spend a lot of time looking at vehicles, and I imagine vehicles as packets moving through the network. And I watch how they flow through streets, different expressways, the slower ways that you have. And I imagine, the larger vehicles, the buses and the trucks are the larger frames in my network. You have your smaller packets, so the bulk of your network traffic is these smaller cars. And then you can have beacons or management and control frames, which could be motorcycles squeezing in between those packets, doing the functions that they need to do. And then how does traffic merge? Or if you're in the lineups that we have for lunch, studying just how queuing mechanisms work. What's the most effective method to queue people and packets through your network? So I just look at that, think about it, wonder if there's ways that we can do better things in our designs and our networks. Hey, so why this talk that I'm giving talking about rate limiting? First, often, hotels, common scenario, you have undersized internet pipes. One way that administrators like to control this is by enforcing rate limiting. They think if we rate limit the number of users, it'll be more fair for all of our users, and they'll get a better experience. You also have bandwidth-hungry users, right? You want to control those users so they're not penalizing and consuming traffic from your other users. Depending on the applications that are being used, some are more hungry than others. And we may design our network today, but tomorrow a new application is released or it's modified and behaves differently. All of a sudden your Facebook feeds are loading videos in real time. So the bandwidth consumption of those applications can change overnight, and now our network design is no longer valid and current. Okay. Also, to set the stage here, I just wanted to talk really briefly about the OSI model, which I hope all of you in this room are familiar with, the 7 layers of the OSI model. And of course, because this is a wireless conference, wireless deals with the bottom 2 layers. And it's just to make this more comfortable for you guys, I kind of color-coded it, so it should look like some of your site survey designs, so you guys kind of ease into that. But I'm not sure if you guys are aware that there's actually 10 layers in this model. Okay, so if we expand this out to 10 layers, layer 8 is the management layer. Okay, this is when the management team gets involved. They can try to provide some insight. They feel compelled and driven to provide commentary on how they can influence and change. They like to think they're making your design better. This is potentially also where the legal layer comes in. So legal teams, this could be the reason why you have a captive portal. From their perspective, in their professional opinion, they mitigate the legal risk of their company by having a captive portals. Or you could have other legal teams that don't think it impacts their legal risk at all, so they decide not to have a captive portal page. But this layer will drive your design. Okay, oops. Layer 9 is the financial layer. Okay, these are the ones that report back to your stock or to the shareholders. They control the purse strings of the project. They can drive a lot of change into which access points you can purchase, how aggressive you need to be in negotiating the sales and the purchase, and your subscriptions and support going forward. But the last layer, probably one of the most important layers in Wi-Fi, is layer 10. That's where the aesthetics committee comes into place. Generally, I find these are the people that don't appreciate the beauty of access points. Okay, Carter wasn't able to be here, but he did provide me kind of a sneak preview of one of the skins that they're working on for their antennas that he mentioned yesterday. So this could satisfy the requirements of the aesthetics committee, depending on how you want to cloak and camouflage your antennas. But they can influence and they can make and break your RF design. So if you engage this committee too late, and they have the power to dictate and drive where you place access points, things can really change. Okay. So here's just a simple network topology, just to kind of put us on the same framework here. You have different layer 2 segments. Right, so if you're old enough to remember the days of X25 and frame relay, X25 did error correction on every link on a hop-by-hop basis. You did error correction, whereas frame relay did end-to-end error correction. Okay, so people thought you'd get great speeds and performance by moving from X25 to frame relay because you didn't have all the acknowledgements. But when they upgraded to frame relay, they used the same physical infrastructure, which at the time wasn't very reliable. And so now a lot of frames were failing end-to-end that have to get retransmitted. So in the initial days of frame relay, often the links were much slower. And then if we look at the layer 3 segments, our station here between the router has its IP addresses, and then we have a layer 3 on the other side. But layer 4, our segment, is really where we're concerned about, and this is where we're going to apply the rate limiting. Okay, and then everything in the cloud here, this could be a combination of a whole bunch of different technologies. We don't really care what's set up in the cloud. TCP itself, it has a back-off mechanism built into itself. So when you start flooding your TCP frames, when they start being dropped, thrown into the bit bucket, TCP adjusts the window size to start slowing down the traffic. So TCP will naturally start regulating that traffic for you. So this is one aggressive mechanism of doing it, is TCP tries to ramp up as fast as it can, and then quickly gets dropped off. So you get this kind of a sawtooth form. Okay. Here's just another method of how you can adjust TCP. But I did some performance testing, and what I would really emphasize in this point is when I put on rate limiting, although I can adjust the rate of my TCP flows through my network, my data rates from the Wi-Fi perspective remain at the higher data rates. So some people have decided that, hey, if I put on a 5 meg rate limit, why not disable all of my high Wi-Fi data rates? Because if I'm only going to push 5 megs, why do I need to transmit it, 200 megs, 450 megs? Why not shut that off? But I'd say leave those high data rates on. You want your transmissions between your station and your access point to go through the airways as quickly as possible, so reduce the amount of airtime you make. Right? So this is kind of the main point of this presentation that I want to make. Here's just a duty cycle shot. When I'm sending unlimited throughputs, I'm consuming a lot of the airtime for my frames being sent, but when I apply the rate limiting, I'm sending less frames, but they're still going out at the higher data rates. Okay? So just some configuration guidelines. Never tweak your 11A or 11N, AC, or AX rates. Always leave those kind of default settings for the manufacturer. You guys might know what these are. So this is Wi-Fi 4, 5, and 6, just so you guys know what I'm talking about here. Leave those higher data rates on. And I always like to have a starting point. I like to start at 6 megabits per second, and then based on the network requirements for that particular design, move on from there. Right? So it's always kind of depending. And on that note, disassociate.